Hey there boys, today we're going to be talking about shotguns, which I think are pretty underrated by a lot of the more casual audience. I know that the hardcores already know that they do the most damage, but there's still a large amount of people out there that are just using fusion rifles because they think they're the best damage, when really shotguns are. I also know that a lot of people might blow off shotguns as being overly sweaty because they only understand the shotgun swap methods, but we are also going to be covering ways to use shotguns which don't involve any swaps that are still better than fusion rifles, so make sure you stick around if you are one of those people. The first thing that we want to do is actually categorize the types of shotgun setups into different categories because there's actually a lot of different ways to use shotguns, and depending on how you want to use them, you want different perks. The first category I'm going to call single gun, which is pretty much just, as it sounds, using the gun for damage, and it's as simple as that, there's nothing else to it. And for that it's going to be things like surrounded or vorpal or even trench barrel, because you can just basically shoot the gun to do damage, and it's as simple as that, other than trench barrel obviously requiring a melee, but that's not really very hard to do. Then we sort of have a middle ground between being a swap but not being a full-on swap. Mainly this is going to be for your cascade point shotguns. The cascade point setups require less frequent swapping than the fully fledged shotgun swaps, but they do still involve switching your weapons, so I wouldn't just categorize it as a non-swap weapon. And finally we have the swap shotguns, and these are going to be things like your lightweight frames with slick draw, or also your swapping ags if you're more into that. You would also use slugs on the 2 or 3 situations where you would use slugs over pellets, which is actually another misconception I want to cover. Slugs are not that good now. Pellets are better. To put it simply, pellets just have better value per shot. Either that's more damage per shot, or they shoot faster to the point that the damage per shot doesn't need to be higher. But there are some special bosses like Kali and Shirachi which have unique crit multipliers which actually do make slugs better. Another one is if you have a boss that is easy to crit that is a little bit far away and your team isn't setting you up to get closer, slugs might have the range difference you need since they have around double the range of a regular pellet shotgun. But otherwise, I'm going to highly suggest pellet shotguns overall for damage. So first of all, we'll start simple and just look at the single weapon shotguns, then we'll move up to the cascade setups, and then finally we'll look at shotgun swaps last. A lot of people think shotguns are just for 1-2 punch and not for the damage of the weapon itself, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. Shotguns are actually probably the most varied special weapon in the game when it comes to DPS, and we're going to see that as I show you the different ways to use them. So for the purposes of this video, just to keep things simple, I'm pretty much just going to run through some of my favorite shotguns that I keep in my arsenal and explain how you can use them. And starting things off with my favorite is actually going to be Imperial Decree. I actually have 3 of these crafted, 2 for PvE and 1 for PvP. This shotgun actually is very underrated, I'd say. It is the best trench barrel shotgun in the game right now for starters, and it is also a kinetic aggressive capable of getting surrounded, which is another very good damage perk. But my favorite unique use case for it is going to be Trench Barrel. You pretty much use it the same way that you would use Legend of Acrius, but this is obviously a legendary special weapon instead of an exotic heavy. As long as you're able to time out your melees correctly, this will do pretty similar DPS to the lower end range of shotguns, like Vorpal and Frenzy on rapid fires, however it has much more total damage. And it is definitely one of my go-to weapons for running with Tractor Cannon mainly, just because you would be using this as your main damage weapon, you do have to commit to it a lot. But that being said, if you're using this outside of Tractor Cannon, I really wouldn't recommend that just because it takes so much time and so much investment to get the 3 shots off with Trench Barrel, and if you're not taking 3 shots every time you do a melee, you're going to be losing out on value. And following the Imperial Decree, I'm going to go with 4th Horseman. Now 4th Horseman has a little bit of a reputation right now because it is the gun that limiters are using to cheat basically. They have a glitch where they can shoot slugs with every single pellet from the gun and it's super broken. So using this is probably going to get you labeled a cheater before damage starts, but it's still a really good weapon even on its own. It's essentially a burst weapon. It does its damage super duper fast, but it doesn't really have a lot of total. So it's kind of just an extra weapon to tack on top of a heavy weapon that does good damage whenever you have like 5 more seconds after emptying your heavy. It also holds up on its own for extremely short damage encounters, stuff like Atrax or Morgeth, where you just don't have very long to do damage, and all you need to do is get your damage out quickly. Next up, we have Cascade Point shotguns. These are honestly one of the most fun setups I've ever used in this game. It is so entertaining just to keep Cascade Point going on two weapons back and forth, especially with shotguns where they are very good damage, actually keeping up with shotgun swaps one weapon at a time. Unfortunately, however, they do lose out on total damage compared to shotgun swaps, and since they do still need two weapons, that is pretty much a direct downgrade. However, where I think it really shines is mixing in Fourth Horseman with your Cascade Point weapon. By far, the best Cascade Point kinetic shotgun right now is going to be Until Its Return. However, I also am having fun using an Astral Horizon roll that I just happened to get while I was farming for a PvP version, so I tried it out some and it was okay, but I would definitely recommend UIR as the more serious suggestion. And finally, we have swap shotguns. And there's going to be a lot of options here simply because, well, there's two ways to do shotgun swaps, but there's also obviously two weapons involved for every setup. A big thing to note is that you should, as always, try to be surge matching. A lot of the use for shotgun swapping is going to come from using a support heavy like Gjallarhorn or Tractor. While surge matching is less consequential for Tractor, we actually have a good Void of shotgun choice, so it's still worth it to do that just to squeeze out a little bit of extra damage from your Tractor shots. The basic setup for shotgun swapping is going to be using light weights, and you need to have a handling perk and a damage perk, so you either want quick draw or slick draw being marginally better and allowing you to not spec into handling at all. Quick draw only affects the draw speed, not the stow speed, so you will also need to have a decent handling stat and a dexterity mod on your gauntlets to get the max stow speed with quick draw, whereas with slick draw you get the massive 100 handling bonus and scalar to your stow speed as well, so it's less important. When you're doing lightweight swapping, the idea is to basically apply whatever your support thing is with your heavy, and then start shooting your shotguns back and forth, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, and you do this because it's a faster pattern of shooting them than just shooting one at a time, because essentially the fire rate lock for each weapon is independent of each other, so you can have one weapon's delay between shots happening in the background while you're shooting the other weapon. And that is the whole idea behind shotgun swaps, and it has been that way forever. You can also do swapping with aggressive frames instead of lightweights. The difference between aggressives and lightweights is that lightweights do damage a decent amount quicker than aggressives, but aggressives have much more total damage. Because of aggressives' much lower fire rate, they lend themselves more into doing triple weapon swaps because you have more time to shoot other weapons. Whereas with lightweights, you have much less time between shots to shoot them at max fire rate because the fire rate is so much faster and you have less time to shoot your heavy weapon. So if you're doing a damage heavy weapon like Apex Predator, I would actually suggest using aggressive frames over lightweights so that you have more time to shoot your heavy and you're essentially wasting less time between shots. However, for players doing Tractor and Galley, where most of your damage comes from the shotguns, I would use lightweights because they do their damage quite a bit faster than aggressives independently. And that's going to do it for the video. If you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your support. Make sure to leave a comment, like, sub, all that stuff, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.